Hello there, and welcome to another story time. I'm going to be looking at the message or the cryptic phrase that the nine brought forward in response to my question. In the last video I did, the last story, Spotlight on Stormfire, I asked the question, who is behind the situation with the bow and arrow, the archer, the sassy across the nation, who is behind this? So before I look into this, I'd just like to say, if you hear some shouting outside and some children's voices, it's pickup time from school. Today's the 20th of July and it's 3 o'clock and mums are picking up their children and I've got my window wide open. It's too hot to not have the window open. So you might hear some noise, but it's just children, maybe some dogs. Okay, so this is what the nine brought forward. If you watched the last video, you will have heard this already, but I will just go through this again. We say to you, look to the owl within that has gone before, the one with three names. The father that was taken, one presented to the world as perpetrator, he who was the owl. Yet he was not the one to strike. There was more at play. Look to your history books, for the photographs show all. Timeline switches are most unexpected, and this is that which did not occur at the time of the owl, for it was not the time. Now is the time, and you entered the collective timeline switch where the ear is given, for all must listen to the winds of change. So I'd just like to say, I did say at the end of the last story time, if anyone wants to email me or message me on social media with any opinions or insight into what this could mean, I'd gratefully receive that. As the nine said, due to the free will boundaries around the choice point, we can give clues and guidance only. We preserve the free will boundaries of our own conduit this way, and therefore presented a coded language that bypasses her. So this did bypass me. I didn't have a clue what it meant. However, since receiving so much correspondence, so many messages on social media, so many emails with people saying what they thought as I was reading, and I did read everything, by the way. Anyone who I haven't replied to, who I haven't said thank you for sending this in, it's because I've had so many emails and so many messages. So please take this as a thank you to everyone who wrote to me. I've read every single message. As I was reading the messages from others, I can see that some are people maybe intellectually figuring things out, and I can very clearly see that some of these messages came from deep insight, intuition, and an individual's own expanded awareness, channeling, insight, actual higher dimensional insight. I could tell the differences, but both were really, really helpful, because some are based on logic and left-brained analysis, and others on total intuition, and both had such a place. And as I was reading everyone's messages, which have come in over the last few days, ever since the Spotlight on Stormfire story time, as the messages have come in over the last few days, and I've been reading them as each day goes by, it's been activating my own awareness, and so that I can now look at this and it has a meaning for me. And this is what the nine were meaning. Due to the free will boundaries around the choice point, the nine couldn't tell me the answer to my question because of the boundaries around the choice point, as it must be a free will choice. The choice had to come from me. The analysis and the awareness had to come from me, or from the human aspect. That can be others incarnated in human form. So if the nine say to me, I'm going to bypass your boundaries and send you a coded message, I can ask other people, what do you think this coded message might mean? Because that isn't, that is not overstepping my free will boundaries. That is information on my incarnated level, the level of the nine, should they deliver information as it is, without giving any opportunity for coding and without respecting those free will boundaries, then that's not the same as communicating with someone on the physical level. On the incarnated level, that's a higher dimensional energy, and they must, I don't know if you could hear that, that's screaming children outside. What was I saying there? That's a loud scream. Sometimes we have mums picking up their children from school. The school is close to where I live, so mums park in the road where I live, and sometimes they'll get younger kids out. So there's little 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds being taken out of the cars and taken up to the school, and they are very loud. And I often shut the window at this time when I'm recording, but it is so hot in the UK where I am right now. So when information comes through from higher dimensional communication, higher dimensional consciousness, it's not that they make a choice not to step over our free will and disregard free will. That choice isn't made. That is a natural consciousness that automatically works with free will. It isn't possible for a higher dimensional service to others, positively polarized consciousness to overstep the free will boundaries of the incarnated aspect and humanity. They just can't do that. It's not that they can't, it's just that it isn't in the consciousness or the intelligence of that structure, of that aspect at all, because they are guidance. That's why they're a guidance structure. They are not information givers to the point where they tell you everything. It's guidance, and often that does come in the form of clues and cryptic messages and metaphor and all sorts. As you will know if you've followed my work, it's been like that from the start, but this was especially more cryptic than average, I would say. So I received so many messages, and I am so grateful for all of them. So I had some really interesting things regarding the owl. Some people drew my attention to the owl being an Illuminati overlord symbol in and of itself, or rather it's hijacked as such. The owl itself is a beautiful symbol within service to others. So if you see an owl when you're listening to someone speak and they've got an owl on their t-shirt or an owl in the background, it doesn't mean that they are secretly giving you an Illuminati overlord communication. They could be, but the owl is a symbol of flight, of messages, of communication, of beauty, the bird tribes. I mean, there is so much. So people were drawing my attention to the fact that the owl is that symbol. Also that the owl has been constructed in architecture and in landscape, and people sent me the most amazing photographs of places in the world where buildings and architecture and other man-made designs that are constructed within nature are built in the shape of the owl. And that was very, very interesting. Oh, someone else showed me that the owl is, let me just get that up so I get that correct. Let's have a look. Not in that one. Here it is. Sorry, bear with me. Here we go. So it's just one person sent in that the owl could be an agency with 3 posted letters within it, 3 letters within that agency, like the agency with the letter S, the letter A, the letter N, rearranged in a different way, and the big sort of hexagonal or 50p shaped building that sounds similar to Pendragon in the US domain. That complex that's industrial, that speak to Mrs. Millie Terry, that situation They use a owl as their logo. So it's a logo somewhere in that structure. And I was sent the picture of the logo. So yes, it's this owl in a circle. So again, same sort of thing, that the owl is a symbol within that overlord structure. When I say overlord, I'm kind of using the overlord structure as state, the state that is deep, and also the dark magicians and the dark masters. I'm using them all as overlord, but obviously there are layers within that and factions within that, and I think that's why this situation is confusing, because there's more than one structure to be looking at here. Oh yes, some people said they felt that the owl was Stormfire. Let me see if there was any other. So really, yes, an overlord structure used in architecture, used as a logo. The owl is Stormfire, as in wisdom and truth and all those things. And I agree that these metaphors are often multi-layered, and so much can be looked at. So you could take owl and think, well, it could be this, it could be that, and there's so much packed into that. However, if you actually look in context of the entire message here from the nine, they're saying the owl within. So this is an owl within, it's within something. And it says the owl within that has gone before. So this is an owl within that has been in the past. The one with three names. So people were talking about the agencies that have letters of three within, but the one with three names is still referring to the owl. Then they go on to say the father that was taken, which is connected to the owl as well. One presented to the world as perpetrator, he who was the owl. So the owl was presented to the world as a perpetrator in times gone before, in the past, and it's an owl within. So the main consensus of the people who wrote to me, emailed, social media, messages, however they wrote to me, I would say 90%, if not 95% of all this information all said the same thing. And because there's such a high amount of aware individuals, whether they're coming from analysis, left-brained logic and analysis, or whether they're coming from just simply being a truth seeker, or whether they're coming from deep intuition, channeling insight, 95% of that truth structure that communicated all said the same thing. And so therefore you're looking, and I'm not saying the majority of something is always correct, but in this instant, that consensus, while the others are all accurate, and all part of this, each with its own merit, the actual decoding of the words itself, the owl within, we are looking at a person in the past that was known as Oswald Harvey Lilo. Oswald Harvey Lilo. That's the owl they're referring to in a mono sense, as in tuning in on that one meaning. That doesn't mean that all the other meanings don't have a place within the overall multidimensional coded message. We must take into account all of those things, but looking at this as a response to the question. Now, that doesn't mean that Oswald Harvey Lilo is the archer that released his arrow at Stormfire. What they're saying here is look to the owl within. Now, the reason why Oswald Harvey Lilo is the owl within is Oswald contains the letters OWL within it. So owl is within Oswald. Also, somebody pointed out to me that Oswald the Owl was a very well-known children's storybook. We've got children's noises outside as it's school time, all linking up. Oswald the Owl was a children's storybook or children's TV production. I'm not sure, but it was a children's character, Oswald the Owl, and he was quite well known. And the name is Oswald, the Owl Within. Now, the Nine say that has gone before. So we're looking at this individual that's gone before, as in they lived once before and they are no longer here. They're in the past. The one with 3 names. So whilst we've got all these structures with 3 names, 3 letters, and it's the Trinity and all of those things, which everybody pointed out. Well, some people pointed out. The majority of individuals are saying the 3 names are Oswald, Harvey, Lilo. The father that was taken. So the father was not the owl. The father was taken supposedly by the owl, and the father being the one who has a son or a daughter. If someone is a father, they've got a son or a daughter. You could look at that in a multidimensional sense. Father could mean many things in a masculine leading way, but in the context of this question and this coded response, the father that was taken is the one also with 3 names, or rather 3 letters, and that is KFJ. So KFJ was taken. Now KFJ was taken by an sassy across the nation. I don't know much about KFJ, really, and the story, other than this individual was not service to self. This individual was surrounded by a service to self structure, but always aimed to be service to others, always aimed towards doing the right thing. This was not a negatively polarized top banana. This was not that, but was so influenced. But there came a point where KFJ was going to release something or deliver something to the people. Information, I don't know what exactly, but there was some kind of awareness that this individual, KFJ, had come across that wished to release to the people. So I'll cover that again in a minute, but the next sentence is, one presented to the world as perpetrator, he who was the owl. So Oswald Harvey Lilo is being presented as the perpetrator, as in he's the one. He is the one that did it. He is the one that released his bow and arrow to the father, KFJ. He's the owl. Owl within the name, Oswald. But the 9 go on to say, yet he was not the one to strike. So Oswald Harvey Lilo wasn't the one. There may have been a little girl around called Patsy, which is an American term. There may have been a goat around called Scapegoat, which is more the UK term. That's the same kind of thing. That is what it seems that Oswald Harvey Lilo was in this picture. Because the 9 say he was not the one to strike, there was more at play, meaning there were other things going on, others, something else, whether that's group, others, different, there was something else going on. It wasn't the owl. Look to your history books, for the photographs show all. So some people were seeing that in a more quantum sense, as in inner photographs, as in remote viewing. But looking at this, and absolutely that holds merit, of course, all of these things do. But the majority of people, not all, had understood what the photographs meant, but there were some people that wrote to me that have researched this intensely and had looked at photographs and had seen things in history books. And there are certain websites within the village computer systems that show these photographs. They're easily found. It isn't something I had really been aware of particularly, but I was shown so much by the people that wrote to me. Again, I'm so grateful for that. And I knew as I was looking at all this information, this is what the Nine were trying to say. So it's not that someone else decoded it for me, but someone else provided clues and catalysts. And we are all here to decode the metaphor together. No one person has the answers. Sometimes we need the help of the collective. In fact, as we go forward, we will always need the help of the collective. No one is a lone wolf in this. No one is an island. We are a team. We need one another to work together. So that's kind of what they're saying. And this was the consensus of, as I said, about 95% of people that wrote to me, that this was Oswald Harvey Lilo took the father, KFJ. He was about to release information or some kind of awareness to the people. Oswald the owl was presented to the world as perpetrator, but he was not the one to strike. There was more at play. And in your history books, the photographs show all. So whatever was going on there, it's been captured in photographs. The Nine went on to say timeline switches are most unexpected. That was not a 95% consensus here. There are only a few people who really commented on this. And some were saying that timeline switches don't always occur. And one person, it was only one person that actually said this to me, was that's the same thing as a wild card. Where I explained the lower probability timeline is the most unexpected one. I feel that this person is correct. Some kind of timeline switch has occurred in this scenario with Stormfire, not in the scenario with KFJ. The timeline switch has occurred with Stormfire, because the Nine say timeline switches are most unexpected. So it's a low probability that the timeline would switch. There was a set timeline for what was going to play out here with Stormfire and this Archer and this extended group, which is the same structure as the owl structure. The whole thing is the same. So the higher probability was something very different, a very different picture. But the wild card, which is so linked to Stormfire in the first place, because he himself is and was the wild card. So scenarios around him are wild card scenarios through this hidden, layered behind the veil, hermetic seal, secret protection energetically. If you go back to my video where I talk all about the wild card, that explains it. So the individual who's talking about timeline switch being unexpected is a wild card. I feel that that's correct here. This is that which did not occur at the time of the owl. So there was no timeline switch, meaning the timeline that was seen by the observers that were looking at the timeline that they wished to create is the timeline they got, meaning the intention with KFJ was an assy, sassy across the nation, and what they got was an assy, sassy across the nation. This time, the observers of the Stormfire situation saw an assy, sassy across the nation. That's what they saw. What they got was a near miss. That is not what they saw. Exactly the same as the top banana competition in the first place. So I'm really, really grateful to all the people who've given me little pieces of the jigsaw with your emails and messages for me to piece this together. So that wasn't meant to be, according to the observers. Now, the reason why the Nine say this didn't occur at the time of the owl, because it was not the time. Now is the time, they're saying. Now is the time. It wasn't then with KFJ, it's now with Stormfire. That's when the wild card comes up. That's when the timeline switch occurs. Now, why? Now, a lot of people got this one. A lot of people told me this is what they felt, that there was some kind of information or awareness that KFJ was going to release. Back then wasn't the time, now is the time. So whilst now is the time for the wild card and the last minute unexpected veiled timeline switch, and no, you're not having your sassy across the nation, it's not going to happen. Now is the time for that, but so is now the time for the release of this information. Now, some people said it is KFJ himself because he's the father, so they're giving him the son, as in the junior. Some people are saying it's actually KFJ, the son, the junior himself. Others are saying it's some kind of information. It's whatever it was that was KFJ was prevented from speaking is now going to be released, not necessarily through Stormfire, but could well be. Now, the Nine did say to me quite a while ago, before 2020, that when I asked them about KFJ, the son, the junior son, they replied that they couldn't comment on that because the time wasn't right. That's what they said back then. There's things to occur. They still haven't commented on whether it is actually KFJ. But what they did say back then was KFJ, the father, the senior, has left a legacy. Is that legacy his progeny, his son? Is that legacy some kind of treaty, some kind of extra piece to the village constitution? Is it paperwork? Is it knowledge? I mean, we don't know, but there's a legacy, and that is what I feel could be that which is now ready to show itself, because that legacy couldn't be, it was left as a legacy because it wasn't shown then. So whatever the legacy is, whether it's a person or whether it's a thing or a structure, a law, whatever it may be, and Stormfire is in there, is tied up and intertwined, let's say, with this whole thing. So what people were saying to me is, what the Nine are trying to say is the actual structure that was used for the Stormfire sassy across the nation attempt is the exact same mirror image that was used with KFJ. It's the same format, the same playout, and the same people. So the Nine went on to say, now is the time, and you entered the collective timeline switch. So this wasn't just a timeline switch for one individual to experience, or even a few individuals. It's collective. The whole humanity has switched timelines, if you will. That's switching timelines is a metaphor. It's a metaphor for the probability field playout. So the most likely probability is usually the one that plays out, but collectively, what has played out here was not the most probable when it comes to all the intentions and the logistics and the planning and the plotting and the dark magic and everything else in there. The most likely play out was the wild card, and that's collective. So everyone will be responding in some way to that, whether they believe, I talked about the consciousness choice point, whether they believe this part of the consciousness choice point. And one person pointed out to me regarding the consciousness choice point, even if individuals believe that this was the white-capped pixies and it was set up and it was staged and that Stormfire was in on it, if these are individuals that were previously asleep, then they're waking up to something. Yes, it's a false narrative, it's a false reality, but at least they're aware that there's a possibility of that kind of thing occurring, because prior to that, they would never entertain such a thing, even though they've gone off on a tangent. It's still an awakening of sorts. It's a false awakening, but it could still be guidance into a certain direction that eventually brings them back into focus, into a true reality. So it's still an awakening of sorts, and somebody pointed that out. Now is the time, and you enter the collective timeline switch, and then where the ear is given. So this was, I had lots of responses to the ear. Some people were saying back in the Roman times, Julius Caesar or whoever it was would say, friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ear. So giving of the ear is lending support, giving someone their loyalty, giving someone their listening to them, listening to what they're saying. And then there in history, often when someone was close to the king, they would be said to have the king's ear. It meant that they were close to them. So people are saying that collectively, the ear is given by this huge, huge collective that are loyal to Stormfire, that know who Stormfire is and what he's trying to do, and they understand the significance of Stormfire. They are lending their ear, as in the collective of service to others, awake and aware, truly aligned individuals who align with truth and honesty and all that is good. They have the king's ear, as in Stormfire being the king. As a metaphor, they have his ear. So there isn't just one person that has Stormfire's ear. We all have Stormfire's ear. So that's another interpretation. And I do feel that very much holds merit here and is definitely something to be aware of. But other people were saying that the timeline switch is shown by Stormfire giving his ear and not another part of him, as in the rest of his person or head or brain or whatever part would be in into the trajectory of that arrow. The collective timeline switch where the ear is given. So the ear, the Stormfire's ear, was given not what they saw, what the overlords saw, what the observers saw when they looked to the original remote view, or however whatever technology, the magic mirror technology, whatever they're using, and they saw the sassy across the nation take place. Instead, the ear was given. The ear was given. So I think there's two meanings here, and I think they both are valid. And then the Nine said, for all must listen to the winds of change. And so many people commented on this. One person, just one person, told me there is a song called The Winds of Change. And apparently that song was recorded or written by someone who was a member of the agency with the 3 posted letters. And that there's clues in the song Winds of Change, meaning it's so literal that everyone needs to go listen to the song Winds of Change. That was really interesting. I haven't listened to that song yet. I'm going to, but I do think sometimes things are very literal. Could absolutely be that. So I'm putting that out there. Another, several people picked up that Queen Melanina, which is Stormfire's lady, when she put out this beautiful message, one of the phrases she used was winds of change. I wasn't aware of that at all. I actually did look at that letter and I just completely was unaware. So whether that's something subconsciously taken note of by me and come out in this message from the Nine, or whether it's absolutely directly from the Nine, for some reason I didn't note that Queen Melanina had said winds of change. So what winds of change would mean in that respect would be a timeline switch, another way of saying a timeline switch. But winds of change would be, rather than a timeline switch in the moment, as in you saw this picture that was not the ear, and now what actually manifested was the giving of the ear and the lack of success within the attempt, and the intention was not manifested. Rather than it being a momentary switch, it's a huge long-term switch, which is what the Nine were saying. There are repercussions, there are things yet to come over the coming days, the coming weeks, more and more coming out, more and more information, more and more misinformation, more and more disinformation. So that consciousness choice point stays with you, and every single new bit of information you're having to think, could this be true? Is this right? Which is why it's so important to get the premise correct. Is it white-capped pixies or is it not? So all must listen to the winds of change, as in the wind has changed, as in the consciousness has changed. The way the people think has changed. The way the people see Stormfire has changed. What people want has now changed. It's a huge shift. So it isn't just a timeline switch, it's a consciousness switch as well. One person did say they felt that the questions given, is this white-capped pixies or is this not white-capped pixies, was an unfair question, as it's not so black and white. And I did actually say, rarely is this so black and white. I put that in the video. Rarely is this so black and white. But what they were saying is it's a bit of both. So what this person's saying is, when you're saying, is it white-capped pixies? The answer is, well, it is a bit. Okay, that's valid. And I'm not discounting anyone's opinions here, because I realize this is a consciousness choice point. So everyone's opinions are valid, but then we use those opinions to formulate our own. I personally feel there is no white-capped pixie influence here. So one of the things that somebody said to me was that they had heard that this was originally an overlord plan. Someone or a group of people found out about the overlord plan and told the white-capped pixies in the novel. The white-capped pixies then staged the whole thing to scupper the plans of the original. This is not in alignment with how it was, but it's so close to what I see, which is that there was a plan, and then another group have come in that are not, that the other group didn't know about. The ones that originally planned to go ahead with something that had a similar play out, it's a different group, a different department, a different offshoot of the overall state that is deep. Is a different group. So the original state that is deep group who were planning the first thing didn't know. So it's true that there are two compartments here, but neither of them are white-capped pixies. There's no white-capped pixies involved in this planning. You must believe what you believe to be correct, but from my paradigm, from the information that I have, and the truthful reality I am moving into, as in my analysis and my observation and my conclusions, and they're not conclusions because they're obviously ongoing, there's more to come with this whole story. I am saying, from what I see, there's no white-capped pixie involvement other than the aftermath and the outpouring of love and the support and the respect. And the white-capped pixie involvement is absolutely from the higher realms. Of course, that is ordained by Christed forces, angelic forces, extraterrestrial good guys. I mean, whatever name you want to give them, God, all of this, positively polarized fields of manifestation, positively polarized particles of intelligence that are able to create manifestation, that can shield potentials and probabilities, and then can shift wild cards to occur. The higher consciousness, absolutely, that's where the white-capped pixies are, but they're not white-capped pixies on the ground. So the story goes that someone or a group of people, whoever this story has come from, is that it was originally an overlord plan. Someone told the white-capped pixies of the plan, and they then engineered the whole thing. That's similar, but not a correct analysis of the fact that there are two factions at play, but both are of a service to self-structure. So that's the next thing to look at, because I did say that I cannot see the full Dark Magician, Dark Master. It's not that I can't, I've chosen not to go delving in there because there are consequences to that, and it's really not needed. What we have here on the ground is the state that is deep, and I have now realized through this situation that the state that is deep is, I've always known that it was a layered structure, but I didn't realize that some of the layers would not tell the other layers what they're going to do, or that some of those layers might mislead the other layers. I mean, I knew that that happened individually, and that sometimes, like for example, what I've seen for quite some time now, um, probably I think around 2020-ish. It may have been slightly before, it may have been slightly after, but I saw Mrs. Harrison Camelina being prepared to take the role of the Dark Queen, as in the dark top banana, and being prepared as in very magical, very deeply ritualized. So there's many energetic preparations that take place long before the ordination, because when the dark one becomes the top banana, it's not just the presentation to the world in the Politico magazine, it's also the presentation to the dark structure as that person takes the role of king or queen. So I've always seen Mrs. Harrison Camelina being prepared to take the role of Dark Queen, and then at the last minute, someone else takes her place. Now, whether that will actually happen or not, and I think we could be fairly close to that timeline, something happens and Mrs. Harrison Camelina is not the chosen one and is very upset, shocked, disillusioned, betrayed. So I knew, I mean, whether that actually manifests or not, we have yet to see, but that's what I've seen for quite some time. And I think they have to have their own wild cards, not that that's presented by consciousness itself, that they do it. So what you expect might occur may well be something completely different. And the very people involved within the state that is deep aren't told that either. So it's a shock to them. I didn't realize quite how deep that was, because what I'm seeing is I've seen the state that is deep as a lower tier and the dark masters and dark magicians as a higher tier. But there are other tiers, but let's say there's a middle tier, and it's very different. And I've been looking at this since I've been getting all these emails in and all these messages. I've been looking at the situation, realizing what the Nine are saying, that this is the same thing that happened to KFJ. Well, if it's the same thing that happened to KFJ, then we know that that is a faction of this state that is deep. But why is it that I saw the state that is deep not knowing? So what I'm seeing here is a middle tier. So this is kind of partly state that is deep and partly overlord, but not fully overlord, but a little bit more influenced by dark masters and dark magicians than the state that is deep, that is, it filters down through a third party system. I don't really know how. This middle tier is different. So the state that is deep has this really dark energy that is very built upon corruption, greed, financial manipulation, and also a kind of ritualistic, in the novel, in the fantasy fiction novel, when the vampires and the dark witches all get together, it's debauchery, and it is really low vibrational energy, and it uses and takes energy from others, takes energy from the innocent. It is a very deeply parasitic system, and that's what's there. This middle tier is different. It seems to be more financial, but not quite so manipulative in this dark, evil way, more matter of fact. This is what we have to do. We are ordained to do this. So it's kind of like a cross between the state that is deep and a cross between the dark masters. So it's another faction. I'm not familiar with this faction, but that seems to be where this is coming from. And this lower tier knew nothing about it. They were kept out of the loop. So there's a lot of anger and betrayal and shock and annoyance in the lower tiers of the state that is deep, because they weren't told, and still some of them don't know where this has come from. And it's had such a huge positive backlash, as in a positive response, a positive outcome. Energetically, the angelic frequency has been drawn into this reality in droves, in a way that happens maybe during an eclipse, a powerful eclipse, during the solstice, during an equinox, during the Lion's Gate. These portals open and there's an inpouring of this higher dimensional, positively polarized angelic force that comes in through the conduits, and it's just love is blasted at that point. That doesn't normally happen through events that are not timed astrologically or within this white wheel, as in solstices, equinoxes, the procession of the movements of that field, that time clock, that wheel. This event has created it. Stormfire's reaction, behavior, the way he has conducted himself, the people around him. I don't necessarily mean those that were part of the protection system. I mean the people around him in his overall party system, the family, his family, I mean, not the family, the people that follow him, the patriotic world of pixies and gnomes and elves that are very aligned with that top banana structure. That has held such an outpouring of emotion, of support, of love, that it's opened a portal, and we've had this timeline switch. So if you will see channeling, I would imagine you will see channeling coming in now from multiple places, saying there's been a huge timeline shift, and that things will now change. There's been a huge shift, and now we'll see a change. So does this signify a switch to a more positive experience? This was always on the cards. We didn't know exactly how it would switch, or that I didn't ever see this situation with Stormfire. But yes, it does mean that, and this means that that darker structure will try ever harder. But for some reason now, they are fragmented, because this middle tier structure didn't tell the lower tier structure. So there's arguments, but the lower tier, the way that they pledge their allegiance is they don't question the tier above them. They can't question the tier above them. They can't take it to the top and think, look, guys, you've behaved really badly. Why didn't you tell us? They can't do that, because they know that they are the subordinate structure to that. So they have to find a way to deal with this. And that makes them ever more irritated and angry, and they can't take it out on the higher line, so they take it out on the people. Now this is kind of what I'm seeing, and it fits. But there was one person, possibly two people, that emailed me that said, might it be the reason why you saw shock and confusion and surprise and questioning, like, what's going on within the state that is deep, is that because they truly believed that the sassy across the nation would succeed, and the reason why they're so shocked is because it did not succeed. That's worth taking into account, and thank you to the people that wrote that in. And absolutely, I'm going to remain open-minded. It's a possibility. My feeling is more that they didn't know, because this is another structure. It's another branch of the service to self, and it suggests that the service to self structure, maybe not including the dark masters and dark magicians at the top, but that the tiers coming down are imploding because they are not unified. And for many years they might not be unified as individuals, but they all had a unified goal, which was to preserve the overall service to self structure and remain loyal to it no matter what. And that has been messed with, if you will. The loyalty has to remain, but it doesn't stand in the same place. The loyalty was unwavering. So there's an unraveling going on in the state that is deep structure because of this. And there is a mistrust. Not that that wasn't there already, there was mistrust, but there was also a kind of camaraderie there somewhere, a silent respect, and that seems to be messed with, and it's changed. I'm not going to go too deep because there are consequences to do so, and so I'm giving you the sort of the first few layers that I feel is safe to delve into. Any more than that, and I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to go deeper into that structure. And I will say once again, we are discussing a fictional novel here. We are talking about dark fantasy fiction with elements of horror. And I have so many people that are helping to write this novel. And I want to thank everyone who've sent in their proposed chapters for the novel. I'm very, very pleased with the amount of people that wrote in. So I'm just going to have a look at my notes now and see if there's anything I have missed out. One person said the owl is an inner spirit animal. It stands for your intuition. So listen to the owl. The owl is your inner wisdom. I absolutely agree with that. And that person went on to say the owl is Stormfire because he has aligned intuition and he's listening to his inner spirit animal. All of that is true. And in the quantum sense, in the higher layers of this, absolutely. So owl has got multiple meanings, but the literal meaning, I truly believe, is Oswald the Owl. There's a band that's named Kennedy. How am I going to do that? There's a band out there. The name of the band has Kennedys in it. And when you're no longer alive, what are you? Well, what you are when you're no longer alive, the word, which is a 4-letter word beginning with D and ending in D, that's also in the title. It's a band and that's what it's named. And they have a song named The Owl that questions who is responsible. Sorry, no, this person is saying if the question is who is responsible, it's answered in that song called The Owl, sang by Kennedys who are not alive. Several agencies with the 3 posted letters are listed in the song. Again, I haven't listened to the song, but so that's 2 songs to listen to. The Owl by Kennedys who are not alive, and a song called The Winds of Change. They both have clues within them. Now, could this be a literal information? Yes, because the information coming in from the 9, that cryptic message that bypasses my boundaries, is a convergence. So you've got this generalized picture of KFJ and the Oswald the Owl and everything else. That happened before is what happened now. Same people, blah blah blah. But you've got these deeper layers to unravel, which people have done, which is amazing. So yes, go listen to those 2 songs. Absolutely. So what else? What's this? Oh, yes, there's another narrative saying that the Whitecap Pixies found out about this supposed sassy nation, and they did nothing and allowed it to proceed. That to me is complete fantasy, because if they had known about it and allowed it to proceed, the intention was to end the living force of Stormfire. That's to prevent Stormfire from not only not becoming top banana, but no longer living in a living sense. So the Whitecap Pixies, if they're truly white-capped, would never ever do that. Why? Because that structure is built on service to others and compassion. And yes, there are some individuals there that have switched from a darker place into a light space, and some of them may be more neutral, but predominantly that's a service to others structure, and they know how pivotal Stormfire is. They know how important Stormfire is. So no, that absolutely, from my opinion and insight and connection and information, but you must decide what you feel is right. So no, they wouldn't sit back and allow it to happen. This is it. Someone else said, is it true that Stormfire was wearing a vest that prevented the arrow, and that proves that Stormfire wasn't the real Stormfire. It was someone else. It was a double. It was a copy Stormfire, and that person really did lose their life, and the real Stormfire was never there in the first place. Again, I mean, you've got to make up your own mind, but this to me is fantasy land, is complete and utter nonsense. It's a false narrative. And the issue here is you have genuine people, genuine truth-seeking people parroting this false narrative, singing from this false narrative song sheet. And what they don't realize is this false narrative is the overlord narrative. This is the narrative they're going to try to spin, as in Stormfire arranged it all. Stormfire was in on it because he wanted to give himself a better profile and get lots of ticking on the boxes and be a really great top banana. So he arranged it all to get sympathy or to get whatever. That's the dark narrative. That they're so caught up in what on earth happened that they're spinning this narrative, which is complete nonsense. And you've got all these truth-aware, service to others individuals who are good people parroting the same narrative as the overlords. So be really careful where you subscribe your belief system, where you build your paradigm, and which consciousness choice point you choose. Because if you aren't in alignment with truth, you're on a false narrative, and the false narrative is an overlord narrative, simply by the fact that it's false and overlord. Yes, it can be a learning curve if you don't stay there, but if you're parroting that narrative, that's the overlord narrative. You will see this narrative being parroted. People saying, oh, it was someone else and that one died, and the real Stormfire was never there. Of course that was the real Stormfire. Of course it was. Other people saying, he was in on it. Another thing, I think you need to look, if you can, empathically and tune in on Stormfire's emotion at that time. And you will feel the shock, the bewilderment, the hurt in his heart, fear, concern for those around him. All of those feelings are so obvious. They're pouring off him. I tell you what, if he's in on it and he's an actor, he is better than Anthony Hopkins. And as far as I'm concerned, he's one of the best actors on the planet. If Stormfire's in on it, he deserves 1 million Oscars. And that's a dark structure in and of itself and a whole other story. So, come on, man. Come on. You have to see the truth here. You owe it to yourself to be aligned with truth, to see truth and know truth so that you can live truth and speak truth. You really do. It's part of your ascension journey. Let's have a look. What else do we have? If anything, several people saying the owl represents wisdom. Absolutely. Someone said Father, and with 3 names, could be the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Also likening to the father that was KFJ Senior and the father that's the son, and also saying that perhaps the relative of the father, who is in the village, the gnome known as Ken, would be someone to listen to because they have been close to this. Yes, I would say Yes, that doesn't necessarily mean that Ken has got any more truth than you have, and that Ken may not get things right, but Ken has personal experience of having gone through this before. And so Ken may well see similarities to the whole thing, of course, yes. So that's that. What does this here? I think this is everything I can think of that I've been through. Let me see. Right. Sorry, bear with me. I've just got everything written down. Just want to see if there's anything I haven't, anything I've missed out. Someone said that the reason why this has happened is because Stormfire is genetically related to KFJ and has some kind of tie there. Not anything I'm seeing, but worth mentioning. But the majority of people were talking about KFJ. One person did say that if you look at the owl could be a bird in the bush, and that there is a gnome that likes to live in a bush. Therefore, that owl is known as Mr. Bush. And that particular owl that lives in the bush was responsible for KFJ, who gave the order. Therefore, it could have been the gnome in the bush that did the same. I feel that the owl that lived, the gnome that lives in a bush will have played a part in the KFJ, but was never the order giver. That's coming up from a more of a higher tier, and it would have been a group thing. It's never one person, never ever one person. And whether that family that live in a bush had anything to do with this, possibly through relatives somewhere, but what I see is a whole structure that is above what we would know as the state that is deep. It's a different branch. It's the state that is deeper still. You got the state that is deep, the state that's deeper still, and the dark magicians. The state that is deeper still are the ones that knew about this, and orchestrated it, and the deep state didn't have a clue. That's what I think. That's what I'm feeling. That's what fits. But I'll take into account the person who said maybe the reason why you sense shock and bewilderment and confusion is because it didn't work. Anything else? No. Just lots and lots of reasons why they would do this in the first place. Lots to do with money, gold, all sorts of things. Yes, I mean, that's all tied up with the top banana package. So when Stormfire becomes top banana, what you'll see is a package tied up with a ribbon. It's huge and it's got all sorts in it. And it will then, when that package is opened by Stormfire and the team around Stormfire that are service to others, and the same thing is potentially going to happen down the line here in the UK domain with Rigello, similar sort of thing here. When that package is opened, when the top banana gift is given, there are repercussions that will then occur that are on a line of a trajectory of evolution that's the complete opposite that what the service to self individuals want. It's the opposite agenda. It's the agenda of, and I think Stormfire said this himself, the American dream, the Americano domain dream in the novel. That means a happy life with an abundance of goodness, an abundance of things to do and experiences to for everyone in that domain. And you know, you could actually translate that to the whole world, for everyone to live an abundant, happy life. That's always the goal of the service to others. It's always about life. It's a pro-life structure. It's creational. And the service to self is the complete opposite. It's anti-life. It is the opposite. It is removing the Americano dream and turning it into the Americano nightmare. It is the complete opposite, because it wants a structure where there are those at the top that control those that at the bottom, and they actually benefit from those at the bottom. They feed off those at the bottom because it's parasitical. So one is nurturing and giving and self-sustaining because it's a round table. The other is parasitical. One is a circle, or rather a spiral, as it's always evolving, and the other is a triangular or pyramid system. That doesn't mean pyramids are bad. Pyramids are amazing, but it's built on that system. So yes, lots of people saying why they would want Stormfire to not be top banana. And there are multiple reasons. And it isn't even just about the repercussions of the moving forward. It's the power that position affords the top banana, because it is the most powerful piece on the chessboard if it's used correctly. The current so-called top banana that presents to the world, Bebop, isn't the most powerful chess piece on the board. Bebop sits in the position of the most powerful chess piece on the board, but the chess pieces, there are multiple chess pieces around that particular chess piece orchestrating. So when people say, oh, Bebop did this, well, no, he didn't at all. Bebop did that. No, he didn't do that. Bebop's going to do this, that, and the other. No, Bebop isn't doing any of it. Bebop, that's a whole other thing. I mean, people have said to me, it's not the real Bebop. This is a fake Bebop. This is a Bebop with a mask on, blah, blah, blah. Whether it's the original Bebop that was around years ago, fine. It doesn't really matter. I personally feel it is the same Bebop. This is somebody who has, if you will, cognitive decline. Pixies and fairies can get dementia too, you know, and gnomes and goblins. But with Bebop, what they have done is they've used the dementia. So if you're with someone who has dementia, and if you've ever had a relative have dementia, you'll know what I'm talking about. You can use their world. They build a fantasy world around them based on past memory. You can use that to help them. So, for example, if somebody somebody with dementia were to call you on the telephone and say, I'm on a boat in the middle of the sea, and they're really, you know, at home in their house on the sofa, I'm on a boat in the middle of the sea and I'm lost, I don't know how to get home. What you wouldn't say is, don't be so ridiculous. You are not on a boat in the middle of the sea, you silly person. You're in your house sitting on your sofa. That's what not to do. What you do is say, oh, right. So you went on a boat. Well, it's okay. I tell you what, let me help you. So I'm there with you now, and I'm just going to steer your boat to the shore. So now you're on the shore. Let's walk you through the sand. So just get up, walk around, and then, oh, you're back home. 9 times out of 10, and yeah, okay, there might be certain things that don't always work, and then you have to try something else. 9 times out of 10, that person would say, oh, thank you, I'm back home. Because, I mean, that might not be the greatest example, but the point is you can use their world to assist them to find some cohesion. Even if they have dementia, they can have some kind of cohesion. My father had dementia. You know, that was there for the last few years of his life. My father was an actor, an opera singer, in his younger days, and that was his predominant job. I remember going to see him one day, and he said to me, I can't go on stage tonight. I don't feel well enough. I can't go on. I don't know what I'm going to do. So instead of me saying, don't be silly, Daddy, you're not on stage, you're not going to, you gave up going on stage years ago. Rather than me saying that, I said, oh, okay, well, that's no problem. The understudy will be happy to take your role. Thank goodness I grew up in the theatre and knew what to say to him, what we would say if that was really happening. And I said to him, do you want me to give the theatre a call and ask the understudy to go on? I'm sure he would love to. He's been looking for a chance to perform. Would you do that? And I think that might be the best thing. Of course, I'll give them a ring. And then I would come back. I've called them and they're fine to send the understudy on. Is that lying? No, not per se, because your intention is to assist. Your intention is not to cause further confusion. That is the way that I would operate, and that's the way the Nine have taught me, and I've spoken to them lots about this because obviously this was my father. That's the way the Nine have taught me to operate. And this is going to give that person with dementia the safest way to move within that confusion, use their past memories to build the current structure. They're still intelligent, they're still there. Having said all that, sadly, you can do the opposite. You can use the fantasy that that person has to manipulate. And this is what's happened with Bebop. This is what has happened with Bebop. It's very simple. What they have done is convinced him, you are top banana. You are the most important person on the planet. You are the leader of the free village. Stormfire has done this, that, and the other. Stormfire said this. Stormfire said that. And they've used all the memories he may have had in the past that he has already learned in the dark structure and added that in with a false top banana narrative. And so when you see Bebop giving some kind of address, or especially in the debate, he believes what he's saying. It isn't fake to him. That's why he's, I say, so good. Obviously, he's not. He's when you actually measure Bebop alongside someone who is functioning normally, he's falling apart. However, for someone with his condition, he actually did fairly well in the debate, given the situation. So it's relative. From a healthily functioning person, that was terrible. From the perspective of someone, the average person with cognitive decline and dementia, he did well. But that's because he believes what he's saying. So he's managing to gather together the best of memory that he can and piece together some kind of picture. And he may well have been given some kind of herbal concoction from one of the darker witches in the village to help him focus a bit more. I'm going off topic here, but I'm just saying that that's what's happened with Bebop. If you are interested in how that's done, they are using his fantasy world against him and making him believe it. So that can be done for something positive, that can be done for negative. So it's the same thing. It's always the same thing. It's the complete opposite. Everything in service to others is the complete equal, not equal. Well, it's equal in the sense that it stands opposite it. Service to others, service to self stand opposite one another in this realm within polarity. It's only when we raise to higher realms does that lessen and become a fully polarized positive realm. And that the polarity there is this positive aspect and the equal and opposite opposing positive aspect, because it's a positive positive. That isn't where we are yet. That is what we are creating, and we can be there. We can exist there, and many, many, many souls are existing there. But the overall physical reality is the polarity of negative and positive, which is why when people say I call for unity, I'm not backing either a competition runner, or I'm not on the side of this one or that one. I've said before, that's fine in a higher polarity or an unhijacked village. But when the village is hijacked, you have to move to one side of that polarity if you want to be in alignment with Ascension itself. It obviously has to be the positively polarized path. So yes, I mean, I may not have got to every single person's opinion and comment, but I feel I've covered as much as I can, and I hope I've covered everything. And as I said, the majority of individuals, 95% of individuals, did say the owl is KFJ. They linked to the whole situation there. and that the nine are saying that this is the same thing, it's the same pattern, it's the same individuals for very similar reasons, and that legacy that has been left is something to do with a release that was about to be given by KFJ that is now going to come to light. Then wasn't the time for the wild card, wasn't the time for the timeline switch, wasn't the time for that information. Maybe it would have been buried, maybe the individuals receiving the information or the legacy or whatever it is, the person, whatever, they wouldn't have been receptive enough. But now there is enough receptivity for that legacy, for that awareness, whatever it is that's coming. Now is the time, which is why we had the wild card timeline switch. Okay, so that covers that. That's as much as I am aware of and I know. And again, thank you to everyone who emailed me. I had some really lovely long emails, long messages, really wonderful analysis, sharing your intuition, sharing photographs and songs and websites and everything. So thank you so much. Really, really appreciate this. As I said, this is a collective journey. We need one another. Nobody can do this on their own. No one has all the answers. We are writing a novel. We are living a story, and we're all living this story together. We are all writing this story together. Thank you ever so much for listening. And I will be back soon with more videos. Thank you. Bye.